All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Department Podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. It is time for our 2021 NBA season preview. Season starts in about less than a week, so we are excited to break down everything with that. I am Stephen Bologna, joined alongside Jesse Norman and Joe Paolantonio. A lot of big news has been swirling around the league. Giannis Antentokoump has finally signed his long-awaited Supermax with the Milwaukee Bucks. We're going to talk about that and when and if the Bucks can win a ring within those 5 years. James Harden still looking for a trade, even though the Rockets got him some help with John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins. We're going to talk about some undervalued teams that people aren't really looking to make a big push, but we think they might. Some teams that are a little bit overhyped, and then we're going to go into our MVP predictions. So first off, how you guys doing?
2021. That was so weird to hear.
Yeah,
it's just crazy.
And it's like in 14 days.
That's crazy.
Yeah, we're there.
Yeah. This is
what a time.
I mean, if it feels like we were just talking about the NBA Finals, it's because we were. This is a really quick turnaround for the league. Yeah, like such a quick turnaround for the league. I think shortest off season ever, right? Any sport ever. So. Yeah, it's going to go back in because we haven't seen Warriors or Knicks basketball in God knows how long. So, I mean, it's going to be a nice level playing field though. Some teams haven't played in almost a year, and then other teams have been, right active like 4 months ago. So.
Yeah,
no, it's good. It's good to be back.
You bring up the bubble, Joe, and the first question I want to bring up is there is no bubble this year for the NBA. And cases are rising all across the country, as we know. Do we see the teams not playing in a bubble is to be safe? Do you think things might get a little hairy with cases rising and stuff like that?
I think this is probably going to be a thing similar to the NFL. They'll probably have some cases here and there. I don't think if they need to, they will go into a bubble. I do think they have no problem. They probably shut down for like a month and do the bubble thing again. But I think they're going to do their best not to do that. I think a couple COVID cases here and there, players will sit out. The big difference obviously is in the NFL, you can come back, miss one game and you can come back. NBA, you're potentially going to be missing 4 or 5. Let's say one player gets COVID and then there's another scare and then you're losing players left and right. So I think it's good that the NBA is raising the players that are allowed to dress to 15 instead of 13. I think that's good. I think they should add extra players onto the roster. I think they should probably go 18 to 19 deep and have guys available in case of these COVID cases.
No, I do think, obviously, it would be a little naive to think that we're going to get by with 0 COVID cases at all, and it's going to be exactly like it was during the summer. But I do think that the NFL and the MLB already going through this, already having it, really allowed the NBA to kind of take notes and see what to do, what not to do. And I think it seems like the players are really taking this much more seriously in this league than I think in the other sports, as well as the fact that obviously smaller rosters means that there's a smaller chance of one person catching it and bringing it in and spreading it. So, yeah, of course, it's going to be a little difficult, but I think they did the schedule in such a way that they can afford to postpone and move some games around. And I think that that's really the smart thing to do. With travel, playing the same teams back-to-back days or back-to-back games, because again, there was really no textbook guide way to do this, but I think the NFL showed them what not to do in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I think if you have some sort of daily testing, no matter if it's rapid or not, some form of testing to ensure that your players are staying healthy and you avoid this outbreak, I think they will be okay. Like you guys said, obviously there's going to be some cases here and there. You never know when it's going to hit you. But I think it's huge what you said, Jesse, how in NFL it's like, okay, you can miss one game and you're back next week. Whereas NBA, you're playing 3 to 4, maybe even 5 games a whole week. So that could be kind of crucial, especially if it's a a big player, and it's only a 72-game regular season, so every game is going to count. So let's dive into some news, Joe. I know it's going to hurt your heart a bit. Giannis Antentokoump signs his long-awaited Supermax deal with the Milwaukee Bucks. 5 years, $228 million, the largest contract in NBA history. And the rumors, they're done. He's not going to the Heat. He's not going to the Warriors or the Raptors. He's staying put in Milwaukee. What are your thoughts on the signing here?
It doesn't entirely surprise me, but I do think it's really nice that he's staying with the Bucks because he had the ability to form a super team. Really, wherever he was going to go, it was going to be a situation like Kevin Durant or LeBron going to the Lakers. It would have been the same type of thing. He would have probably paired with another superstar or a great young core. With the Bucks, he doesn't really have either of those things. He kind of is the guy, the focal point, but I think that he sees what they're doing. They've been very active this offseason, probably more active than a lot of people thought they were going to be. And that sends a message because, I think Giannis wanted to stay, and he just wanted some sort of statement from the front office, like, we're going for this, like, we are devoted to putting a team around you. And the conversations aren't over. It's not going to end with Bogdan and Drew Holiday. They were going to go to Bogdanovich. They were looking at Bradley Beal for a while. Like, they've been in conversations this entire offseason, and that's all that really matters. I really do think that the Bucks could build something of lasting value. Of course, I think the coach is probably a bigger question mark than a lot of people like to admit. But no, it's nice because a small market team getting the win is probably good for the NBA in the long run.
Yeah, no, this is huge for a small market team like Milwaukee, being able to keep their star player. It's good for the NBA. As much as I am an advocate for player movement, there has been too many players just leaving the teams that draft them and forming these other super teams and everything. I think it's become pretty cliche to not sign your extension and move on. So Milwaukee has given Giannis no reason to leave. They have stayed active. They have tried to build a good team around him. They acquired Eric Bledsoe. That didn't work out as well as they thought. They tried to get, guys in like George Hill. The payoff of giving the contract to Brook Lopez has been immense. They have tried and tried and tried to put this team around him and give him a very competent team that fills out not only a good roster, but one that fits around him of shooters and defense. And they went all in on the Drew Holiday trade. They feel like a lot of teams in the East have two really good players. They think they have three. I don't necessarily think that's a big three, or if it is, it's a very, very weak big three compared to all the others. But they given him no reason to leave, and I think this helps the East be a lot more transparent throughout the rest of this contract. Because if he joined Miami was probably going to dominate for 2-3 years at least. Now this keeps it so that the East is still pretty wide open.
One thing that's kind of crazy to me is that rarely have we seen, really, I can't think of anyone else since LeBron, one player that has just blown up and made a team go from nothing to like a somewhat big market team and a very well-respected team. Anthony Davis, it took him years to put the Pelicans even in the playoffs. And
he had to get DeMarcus Cousins.
And even that, I think LeBron's the last one really to be the only one on the team that kind of brings them to that next level. And he's certainly compensated for it. And here's the thing though. I don't know if the Bucks have what it takes to win it all. I think they have a very good coach. They obviously have Giannis, but Drew Holiday he's not a star. And honestly, you could probably make the argument he's not even he's not a superstar. He's kind of on that borderline of great player star, I think.
See, I like Drew Holiday more than Chris Middleton. I think Chris Middleton is the not star of this. I think he is a guy that, since we were talking about, LeBron elevating, he reminds me a lot of Mo Williams, of just like can have these huge scoring outbursts, looks really good because he's playing next to a supreme number one, MVP, two-time MVP now. So I think Chris Middleton is the question mark for me. And you can make the argument, he stepped up in the regular season last year, averaged more points than he ever has. But then in the postseason, it just never felt right. It never felt like he was the number two. There felt like there were stretches where DiVincenzo was the number two and that Brook Lopez stepped in and was number two. That shouldn't be the case. And I think with Drew Holiday, they should now definitively have a number two. And sliding Middleton to the 3 spot helps, but I still question, his ability and what he can really help to a team with championship aspirations. So right now, I think Milwaukee's probably the number 2 or number 3 team in the East. They could potentially move to number 1 if the Drew Holiday fit just works seamlessly and he becomes a better shooter than we've really seen lately. But we'll see. I think this was still the right decision for Giannis. Milwaukee has done everything they possibly could to put a team around him.
I think with Drew Holiday being a part of this team, I think it allows Giannis to really play more of his game and be like more of the guy that he is, not try to be somebody that he's not. I think there were times last year where Giannis tried to play a game that was not his and tried to be this shooter that he's not, and tried to be this offensive player that he's not. And I think Drew Holiday being there in the starting rotation is going to be huge. And I think also something that Giannis said was that this is not a championship or bust year. He has now 5 years, the next 5 years, to bring a championship back to Milwaukee. I think that the pressure is so much off his back right now that we could be seeing a freer Giannis that we have not seen before. And I think that he will continue to develop, and I do think that he will continue to become more dominant on both sides of the ball. So absolutely, if the question is, does Giannis win a ring in Milwaukee, I think the answer is yes. I don't think it's next year, but I think that having the best player or a top 2 player in the conference basically puts you as a top 4 seed, no matter what, essentially in today's NBA.
Yeah, and when you look at a lot of the teams, when Giannis says it's not championship or bust for him, a lot of the guys who want to contend for the rings, they're on, kind of the back end of their career. They've already won their championships in other places. You look at the Clippers with Paul George and Kawhi, and you wonder how long are their bodies going to hold up. You look at LA, obviously LeBron just turned like 36. Anthony Davis is obviously young, but you wonder how that's going to hold up. Kyrie and KD. Kyrie's hurt every year. KD's coming off an Achilles tear. They both already have rings. They're moving into the final stage of their careers. Giannis is still so young, and a lot of those pieces are still in their prime that 3 years down the line, let's say when KD and Kyrie could potentially be leaving Brooklyn and LeBron could probably be retired or moving to where Bronny gets drafted, or Kawhi, who knows what Kawhi is doing at that point. That's how long their window is still open. And the only other team that you can argue that has that kind of window is possibly the Celtics because of Jason Tatum being so young. But nobody else really has that long-term out there timeline that they do, that the Bucks do.
Yeah. This was Milwaukee had a lot of pressure on their back to get this deal done, and props to Giannis also for not kind of feeding into the rumors, because it's kind of been a rumor since about 2 years ago that if they didn't win a ring by the time Giannis's contract was up, that he was going to look to go somewhere else. But Milwaukee got the deal done, and they are putting together pieces there for Giannis, around Giannis, to let him do his thing, and hopefully he can bring them a championship.
Absolutely, and I think that people are going to follow. That we've seen this before. I mean, Kevin Durant went to Brooklyn, people followed. And you were able to build pieces in LA around LeBron, like these supplementary sort of guys at the back end of their career. They're going
the
to
veteran,
want to play with
the
other
veteran
stars.
buyouts. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're going to see a lot
and
of that
also,
in Milwaukee, I think.
If the Drew Holiday trade was what made this contract possible, you do that trade every day of the week. I don't care how many first-round picks you have to give up. If you are keeping Giannis in a Bucks uniform for 5 more years, you absolutely 110% do it.
Absolutely. And we're going to transition to another player that wants to get out of the uniform that he's in, and that's James Harden with the Houston Rockets. He said that it doesn't matter that John Wall is there now, a new point guard for him to play with. He still wants out. Apparently, they offered Philly. They want Ben Simmons and 3 first-round picks in return for Harden. Obviously, Philly declined that. Do we see Harden finishing this NBA season with the Houston Rockets?
I don't think there's a way that he doesn't at this point. It's clear that the Houston market on him is too high.
Yeah.
Ben Simmons and 3 first-round picks is absurd. Like, I'm sorry. There's no possible way I would ever do that trade if I was Philly. And I think realistically the only team that could possibly get desperate enough for their championship window to make a move that Houston would accept is Miami. I think if they trade Harrow, Nunn, Robinson, and if they throw in Bam, it's not a good trade to me. I think they need Bam to compete in the East. But if they really do just throw everything at him, 3 first-round picks, a couple swaps, I think Miami could get it done, but I just don't think Pat Riley is going to trade away absolutely everything essentially you would have Butler and Harden, and it's really hard to win when both of your best players essentially play the same position.
Yeah.
Like you can't I can't remember the last time that's happened where it's been 2 just exclusively backcourt players. And I mean, you could say maybe Curry and Clay, but I think they play very different. With Clay being a pull-up shooter or Curry being a pull-up shooter and Clay being a very set shooter and built off defense. So I think that would be really tough. But as of right now, they're the only ones that can get this deal done because whatever the Nets are giving up, obviously Houston doesn't think it's enough. And the Nets are not including Kyrie Irving. They're not including Kevin Durant. They're not doing that under any circumstances. And Philly says they don't want to trade Ben Simmons and they don't want to trade Embiid. And so then where do you start the deal? Because Tobias Harris isn't moving any needles. Tobias Harris is one of the worst contracts in the league. Like Houston doesn't want that. And then you look at it, there's teams in the Western Conference that maybe could have some assets. They don't want to trade him in conference. I don't think there's a way that he really gets off of Houston.
It's important to note when you really look at this story as a whole that Harden is responsible for all of the reasons why he wants to leave. I mean, he's running out of there because there's no possible path to going far into the playoffs. And he basically did that by strong-arming every big roster move for the past few years and basically having his way constantly, getting Chris Paul off the team when they would have been better off, and then making them acquire Russell Westbrook to that big money contract, and then not having any chemistry with him whatsoever immediately after. So, like, the Rockets have got to be, I'm sure they want to keep him, but they have to be a little bit tired of this nonsense. He has done a lot more harm than good, especially in recent months. And all of his talent notwithstanding, I think they have to trade him. The problem is that they have absolutely no leverage in this situation. I do think, however, the Giannis signing does change the way a lot of these Eastern Conference teams are thinking right now. There's probably, they know that he's not in the cards, Miami specifically. So I think that could motivate Miami to make a deal at some point. And also, I think we can see a situation in Philly where they get off to a slow start and Ben Simmons has still doing the Ben Simmons things. The front office is getting impatient, and I do think that that could very well happen. It's just does Houston have to lower its expectation? That's the question, and I think the answer is yes. But they can't get gypped. They can't. They have, because this is a move that has to redirect the entire franchise. So they cannot just get one piece, at least in my opinion.
I agree, but also I think they're overvaluing what they have, because you've seen reports of they want an Anthony Davis haul. You're not getting an Anthony Davis haul. You trade for Anthony Davis, he's your franchise player for the next 10 years. You trade for James Harden, you have a franchise player for the next probably 2 to 3 years. And who even knows? I mean, he's very durable. He's shown that he can drop triple doubles, in his sleep. But you gotta wonder how much longer he can keep it up for. What team is gonna not only trade their future, but their future, like 2 futures at once? Who's gonna trade for that, for not guaranteeing a ring?
Yeah,
well, he's got to get
like Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis didn't even guarantee a ring, and the Lakers gave up a lot. But that's because they have LeBron James, who is a number 1, number 2, or number 3 player in the NBA. And at the time that they acquired him, he was probably definitively number 1. I just don't see what team trades absolutely everything for James Harden, because there's no player out there that's on LeBron's level that needed a number 2 and had assets able to go and do it. Like, Jimmy Butler's a great player. You cannot ever argue that he is on like LeBron's level. Like at best, he is like a top 9 player in the NBA.
I think if there's first off, I'm gonna say this: Houston's asking price I think is way too high. But if there was one team that would make the move, there's no other man that knows the Rockets roster and the Rockets front office better than Daryl Morey, who was literally just there a year ago, and he's now in Philly making some big decisions. So obviously, Morey is familiar with James Harden. He knows how that front office values him, and they think of him. So if there was one team to make a move, I think it would be Philly. And like you said, Joe, Ben Simmons catches a lot of slack, for his non-shooting ability. But again, he's still a great player. And for the asking price of Harden, if you trade for him, say, for example, at the trade deadline, realistically, for the pieces you're giving up, you have to win that ring that year. Because, again, you don't know what your contract situation is with other veteran players on your roster. They can leave after the year. If you give up everything for him at the deadline, you got to go out there and win the ring.
Well, it's tough because
Yeah,
you could go ahead, Jesse, please.
I was just saying, like everybody talks about Philly and like trading Ben Simmons. I question the Harden and Embiid fit, because everybody's like, oh, well, obviously Harden's a great perimeter player and Embiid's a great interior player. Harden doesn't like playing with centers. We've already seen that. He didn't work with Dwight Howard. Yes, Dwight Howard was still not himself from Orlando, obviously, but he was still like only a couple of years removed. Like, the whole reason we thought so little of Dwight Howard is because of how much it didn't work with him in Houston, and how he would have these like big games when Harden wasn't available. But when Harden was there, he just didn't pass to him. We see how he praised Capella up and down and then was begging for them to trade Capella because he doesn't help space the floor. So my question is, unless you're having Embiid become Karl Anthony Towns and just have him outside shooting 12 threes a game that he's hitting at, 45% a clip, why does everybody just think this fit works? Like, everybody's like, oh, Embiid and Harden, it's got to work. But Harden doesn't want to play with a traditional center.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to what I was about to say, that his game doesn't really work in the Eastern Conference. A lot of these teams are built on size and are built on depth. And if you're going to sacrifice depth for, a ball dominant guard who plays absolutely no defense, it's not the same game that they play in the West when you have teams like the Warriors and the Trailblazers, when you go to the East with teams like the Raptors and potentially the Sixers and the Heat. So I do think that the Rockets have a lot of decisions to make. They could go a number of different ways, but they have to get something back that will put the franchise in a new direction, whether it's Tyler Herro, whether it's Karis LeVert. Don't know. But it has to change the direction of the team.
Yeah, and we're going to see how things play out there in Houston. But let's get into more of the previewing of the NBA season, 72-game regular season. I want to ask you guys, what is one team that is being either undervalued, underappreciated, that you think could make the jump up, or a team that was good, that wasn't good last year, or is going to be good this year? So a team along those lines.
A team that I think could be interesting, honestly, is going to be Charlotte, depending on LaMelo Ball. I think they're going to be fun to watch. I don't know how good they're going to be, but I think they're certainly going to be interesting, which is a lot more than you can say for Charlotte in the past 15 years, I guess you would say, since their inception pretty much. But Charlotte's going to be interesting to watch. A team that I think has been undervalued a little too much is a team we just talked about, and that is the Philadelphia 76ers. I have my problems with Ben Simmons not being able to shoot, obviously, but they reworked this roster to better fit that. They traded away Josh Richardson. They got back Seth Curry, who was absolutely incredible from the three-point line in the playoffs and in the bubble. They reworked. They got rid of the Al Horford contract. God bless them. They brought in Danny Green. They're building their roster out to have shooters. And while Embiid and Simmons don't necessarily fit together, Embiid is one of the better centers in the NBA. He's top 3. And Ben Simmons, as of right now, to me, is the best perimeter defender in the NBA. He is going to be a top 3 defensive player of the year candidate every single year. He is fantastic on the defensive end. Even if this guy couldn't do anything on offense, he is still a good player just for his defense. I think they're a team that, if everything kind of breaks right and they make another couple moves, this is a team that's way closer to championship contender than I think a lot of people are talking about.
No, I agree. One team I think that is progressing there, and I think this year is going to be a big step for them. I think the Suns are going to be. I don't think they're going to be championship contenders, but I think they're going to be much better.
Kendrick Perkins said Western Conference Finals.
That's nope.
Kendrick Perkins said Western Conference Finals.
It's very clear that they need another piece. They definitely need some size. But I mean, Chris Paul and Devin Booker are going to play very well together. I could almost see it now. I think their games complement each other fantastically. And I mean, remember the last time we saw Phoenix? They were absolutely outstanding in the bubble. It was like they couldn't lose. So and we haven't seen them lose in a long time. So I do think if they make a trade, we're not sure who's going to be available, what's going to happen. But if they do make a trade halfway through the year, we could be talking about this team as, potentially to make a little bit of noise. And of course, I do think that, as always, the Jazz are another team that I do think are always going to be in the mix and always are going to be slept on, as long as they obviously play in Utah. But yeah, that's what I'm looking at. I still think we're going to see the usual suspects at the top at the end, but you know how it is.
I think another team that's locked into the playoffs, for me anyway, is the Wizards. They made enough moves. Beal and Westbrook are easily enough to get you a top, I would say top 6 seed in the
Yeah.
East. It wouldn't surprise me if the Wizards come into the playoffs hovering around the 4 or 5 seed. They're not going to be a championship contending team unless Bradley Beal becomes like otherworldly and becomes a top 12 player in the NBA. I don't necessarily see that happening, but they have a good roster now. They have a roster that's built for the regular season and built to get them to the playoffs. I wouldn't be shocked if they win like 40 games and go 40-32 and lock up like a top 5 seed.
Yeah, and you look at that starting lineup. You obviously have Westbrook and Beal. You also add 9th overall pick Denny Advia, who's been looking really good so far in the preseason. Also with last year's lottery.
I thought in the draft he should have gone no lower than like 6.
Yeah.
6 at the lowest for me. I thought he needed to go 5 to the Cavs, and I couldn't believe he fell.
Yeah, and then you have Rui Hachimura there as well. So I like that pick. I'm going to go with the Memphis Grizzlies. I think they made a good amount of moves this offseason. They got Tyus Jones, picked up Justice Winslow. You have Jonas Valanciunas. But then you have your 2 core pieces of John Morant, Rookie of the Year from last season, and you have Jaren Jackson Jr. They were in the bubble. They did not make the playoffs. But this team showed something, and I think John Morant has the makings of a superstar in him, and they have a fantastic duo there with him and Jaren Jackson Jr. And I think the issue here is that they're in the West, and it is an extremely tough conference, especially with a team like the Suns now, who are going to be better than a lot of people expected. You have the Blazers up there. The Kings could also make a run. But I think Memphis, they are very close to making that playoff push, and I think it could start this year. I do. But Joe, let's go next question to you. The big question.
Okay.
Who is going to be the MVP? Let me hear it.
All right. This is tough because I don't think there's a clear-cut decision right there for MVP. I'm going to go with Luka. I think it's really what we saw in the bubble was another level against the Clippers. I mean, when they almost shocked the world. I mean, after last year, averaged 29, 9, and 8. I mean, the guy's going to be now 21, 22. I believe if Dallas really takes shape around him and really lets him do his thing offensively, because, I mean, we could be talking about a guy who's one of the most lethal offensive weapons in the NBA right now. And I do think that if you give him another year of development, we could see potentially unbelievable things.
Yeah, Luka's definitely, I think, the heavy favorite coming into the year based off of everything we've seen in the series he had against the Clippers. I think the only guy that's going to be able to compete with him this year is going to be a guy with his own narrative, and that's Kevin Durant. And that's coming back from the Achilles tear, trying to be the player that he was before, obviously trying to prove himself in Brooklyn away from Golden State. I think those two are really going to be the only ones up at the top. Obviously, LeBron has won his MVPs. He can be fantastic, and I don't think they'd give it to him. I think they're done giving it to Giannis. Back-to-back years, I think they're good on that. Kawhi's not going to play enough to warrant getting it. Another sleeper, if they really shoot up the standings, Damian Lillard. If he gets them into, the top 3, top 4, I don't see it happening though. So give me Luka or give me Kevin Durant.
Yeah, Luka is plus 350 favorite right now on FanDuel, as I just saw. I think Anthony Davis has an opportunity to have a pretty special season. The issue with him is that he is overshadowed a bit by LeBron James and the numbers he could put up. Obviously, remember in the bubble in the playoffs,
he sits games.
Yeah, I think I don't think they would give it to Giannis 3 years in a row unless he has this miraculous, insane season we've never seen before. I like the Kevin Durant pick, but I really want to go with Anthony Davis. I think he has the opportunity to, 25 and 10 kind of season. LeBron's getting up there in age. God forbid, knock on wood, he gets hurt. Anthony Davis could fill in and just put up some monster numbers, as we saw him do all last year, even with LeBron. So
I think a sleeper pick, another sleeper pick could be Jason Tatum. I mean, I don't know how much of a sleeper pick it really is, but what he did, it's another guy who showed a lot in the playoffs, and it's another guy who really showed a lot last year in the regular season too. He could be the best player on yet another really good Boston Celtics team.
Yeah. And one more kind of question here for you guys. Real simple, one word kind of answer here. Do the Lakers go back to back?
Yes.
As of right now, gotta go. Yeah, they won the championship. They only got better. I genuinely think the only team right now that you look at and are like, I don't know if they beat them is the Nets. I really think that's it right now, because you haven't really seen it together. You can maybe say the Clippers because they didn't play them, but as of right now, I don't think there's a team that you can look at and just be like, oh yeah, they can definitely compete with the Lakers in a 7-game series.
Do you think Brooklyn should be the favorite to win the East?
I think you should have them about second or third just because you haven't seen them play together. But I don't think there is a question. They are right now the most talented team in the East. Don't know if they'll be the best team, but they are the most talented.
The safest bet in the world, I think, is the Lakers to go back to the NBA Finals. I think that, I mean, they really had a great offseason. It's unbelievable how I don't even know if they got that much attention, but they got better. Like, they really improved. And I think the rest of the West took a little bit of a step back, other than maybe Denver and Dallas, who, but.
Well, and I would say Denver definitely did losing Grant.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big loss. Who was supposed to defend their wings.
Mm-hmm. And that's it's not going to be good in a series. So when you're looking at the Nets, give it about, honestly, 4 games before I'm really able to make an honest assessment. Right now, the betting favorites, I think, are probably the Bucks and the Heat, and either one, probably Miami, but a little bit, until we see, because if Kevin Durant's Kevin Durant, then there's no question about it. Absolutely, they should be favored to win the East, but we don't really know how good he's going to be. I mean, this is not an injury that a lot of people are able to make a full recovery from, like it never happened. But if there's anyone I trust to do it, it would be one of the greatest offensive players of all time. Yeah, give it a week. Give it a week before I really make an assessment on the Nets.
I think the Nets are the best team in the East, but we've seen in years prior the Bucks winning the East and then getting shelled in the first and second round of the playoffs. So
I think the Bucks are definitively going to be like the 1 seed.
That's what
definitively. Giannis doesn't sit. They're going to win the East, but I don't think they'll still be the best team going in.
I agree, and I think the Nets will go farther, and I think make it to the ECF. On the Lakers' hand, they got Dennis Schroeder for pennies on the dollar. They steal Montrezl Harrell away from the rivals that share the same arena from the Clippers. I think the moves that they made, this is just a loaded roster, and Kyle Kuzma has yet to take his next step up, and Taylor Horton-Tucker probably not going to get a lot of minutes, but he has been eating up in preseason and could prove to be a vital role player.
If Kyle Kuzma doesn't step up, I think watch for them to trade him this year.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Get something back for him. And then if they trade him and they trade some small second rounders, a couple things here and there, they can potentially be getting another piece added to that team. Maybe not a star player, but somebody plenty good enough that can make a difference.
Yeah, I'm with you, and my answer is yes. I think the Lakers do go back to back, barring any injuries. As we said right now, LeBron and AD is just pretty unstoppable, as we saw last year in the bubble. But that is all the time we have today on the Department Podcast. Thank you, Joe and Jesse, for coming on and taking time out of your day. Go enjoy the snow. Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to follow us on all our socials, YouTube, Spotify at Department_pod, I got about 44 inches where I am, Joe. So I'm gonna go try and shovel a bit. I don't know how well it's gonna go.
Good luck, bro.
Thank you. I believe we have
Enjoy.
we have our NFL picks podcast coming up for Week 15 of the NFL Sunday season. We have a wrestling pay-per-view episode, I believe, coming next week. I talked to the head honcho yesterday, so we're gonna get a lot of episodes out to you right before the Christmas holiday. But thank you all so much for listening, and have a great day.